Well, at this point, I've painted some little prickly pear cactus that a patch that's in an intermediate ground behind the door frame and between the door frame and the bighorn. And for that, I just drew these little paddle shapes. I did look at some pictures on the iPad from the canyon and prickly pear, and they're kind of like little paddle shapes that are all kind of turned and twisted, and some are much taller and shorter, and they have a lot of spiky little thistle, whatever you call the little prickly things that stick as spikes on the perimeter of them, and it's something you wouldn't want to grab onto. But they have kind of a unique green combination, and it took a little bit of time to work that out. But once I got that, it's simply a matter of considering the light and where the light's going to strike and where the where it won't, and making a change in value, and just building up each one like it's a three-dimensional object of its own. It's not all in a group. And then I did a little shading on the ground, and I also have another little patch down to the left. You can't see it here because the camera's kind of zoomed in, but that kind of helps to move the eye, and so we don't have just one occurrence of that unique color. Right here, I'm kind of doing this little trough area between the plateau of stone and its little drop off to the ground. So I'm putting in a little color, a little more shading on the side of these rocks, and I'm going to be adding eventually a stone that bridges the gap there between that and the entryway stone. It won't be very big, but it's just enough to uh, kind of make sense of the change in elevation. And so, in doing this area, the ground and the stone for the entry, I approach it like I do most everything else, layers. And I started by having a fairly good idea with my sketch of what was going to be, you know, what shape and where my little cracks and crevices are going to be. And I don't go into any darks or doing any outlining, but do have a pencil sketch beneath all this. And my first step in doing these is to do some dry brush, just getting a little bit of pigment on the old brush, not this size brush, a little bit bigger, and pulling it across, letting it skip and create kind of these broken textures. And I did that all the way through each stone, even though some are a little darker than others. I wanted that because I don't want this all to be just totally uniform. I want these stones to have their own character. So there's a lot of different colors used, and I experimented with a lot of color. I've kind of gone for a slight green cast, like a green slate, and that seemed to work. But the dry brush, when you initially put it down, is fairly distinct and has kind of crisp edges to it, and those you can either do a lift or add a little bit of water to eliminate that so that it's not too harsh. And I did that many times. I don't know how many in applying the color to these stones. I would drag the brush across, do a lift, add a little water in places, and I try to work on each individual stone one at a time, and build up gradually, as always, because I don't want to be fighting trying to get my white back. And in watercolor, in this painting or any other, you'll never get back to the white of the paper once you paint over it. It doesn't matter how many lifts you do or how much you whatever you apply, like the drawing gum and tearing that up and redoing. It always then will be stained, and it just doesn't have that quality. And white paper is your salvation. So you want to protect it. Think ahead. Where are you going to need it the most? Where is it absolutely essential? You should protect those areas. Sometimes just by masking, or you can use the art gum as long as you don't leave it on too long. Or if you want to create textures with it, that works too. So I've decided in this section I want to keep it kind of light because I don't want to create such a dark accent here that your eye just is immediately drawn to it. I'd rather go to the frame or other areas of the painting that I want to emphasize a little bit more. So although it's not the total focus of the painting or that what I really want to emphasize the most, I do think it's important to spend equal time with this or even more because it does draw you in. It is where kind of we begin to look into the distance. And so the cast shadow is important here, I feel, from the door frame. And in doing it, my approach was building it up slowly. And I have to also remind you that when you're doing these, you don't want an outline on your shadow, so you've got to be vigilant. And as it's drying, the paint's setting in, you want to just take a small brush and on the edge add some water or coax it a little bit so that it doesn't create a, like what's commonly called like a tide pool mark, where you have a lighter value in the interior and then you have a dark edge on the outside, and that starts to look like an outline. So you got to soften that up. But the cast shadows themselves are actually just darker values of the same colors that you used to paint underneath it. For example, the stones by the door frame, to create those shadows, I just used darker values of the same thing and did a little bit of layering there, but also, in addition, what I do like to do in shadows is just a tiny bit of alizarin crimson and maybe Payne's gray combination, which creates sort of a violet. I leave it a little bit on the red side, and very, very little of that because it's super strong. And that kind of helps to move it back. The blue does also. Like the Payne's gray or the cerulean blue, just a tiny bit of that has the same effect. It kind of turns off the chroma and pushes it back and makes it recede. So I did add a little bit of that in the shadow after I did my initial overlay, and doesn't take much, and it starts to work because that's kind of how our eyes work. We tend to I'm trying to fool the eye in a sense, because I want you to perceive that the light is affecting the vision, and it does. So you have to do that in your painting too, and by that I mean you start to see colors and shadows that really aren't present, which is interesting, but it's true. And anyway, my go-to combination is like a touch of alizarin crimson with a little Payne's gray, and in this case I added a little bit of brown of Probably, I think that was raw sienna because of the all of the wood, and I want to kind of echo that. So play around with your combinations of shadows and don't just grab, like a black and make a gray out of it and go swiping it across. So that doesn't work very well. Now I'm using a really small brush at this point, and I'm trying to draw with it, and I'm just creating a little stone that will bridge this gap here that I would mention. And I ended up putting down quite a bit of color, doing a lot of lifts, and then I would played around with a little bit of, where I'm getting to the end, I played around with some white, titanium white, and I don't like to use it very often, but it does do one thing pretty well, and that is it will kind of turn into a gray if you use it over the top of a layer. And so I use it to create texture and kind of gray this stone on top so that it's moved not from the top level but down a level, so it's not going to appear to be even with the tops of the stones that I've already done. And it, when you apply it, it looks very bright and white, but it's, it is a watercolor. I'm not using an acrylic or something, which I would not do, but it doesn't stay white very long, and it will combine with whatever's underneath it, and it starts to kind of almost disappear, and you end up with this kind of real faded patch. It's not white, but it's a much lighter value of whatever you put down there. So I'm doing a little stone here off to the side. Now I think I had to apply kind of a light mixture of this white over the top of that about 3 or 4 times before I got it light enough, because it just almost completely go away. I did a little bit of it punching up some highlights on the stones themselves, and then I also did some line work with some darker values to kind of create some accents and point out, some lines in the stones where there are fractures, or I wanted to show the gaps between them, or anything else that I wanted to bring up or accent. And even with that, I never used black. I don't like it. It just somehow it looks like it doesn't belong to me, and it always draws way more attention than anything else I put down. And so I kind of avoid it, like I avoid white. But once in a while, it's white's a necessary evil if you're trying to reclaim something you've done and you can't get back. You may have to go to it. Try not to. And so here I'm going to just complete my details, and I'm going to be moving up to the top of the composition where I've got a few remaining limbs to do. And when I get there, I will want to comment about that and do my signature, and then off we go. But in the interim, I'm going to put on a little more music, and we'll get back together in a few. Okay, I've reached the point where I need to do these limbs that extend into the painting from the upper right. And first thing I'm doing here is just doing one of the main limbs and getting it wet so that the paint will track within the water that I put down. The paper is pretty light there. I've kind of protected it, but these limbs will be relatively dark, so shouldn't matter too much. I have left some light where the more slender limbs extend, and then there will be these bunches of pine needles in groupings that grow from them, and they're done in a combination of colors. I start with some yellow ochre with a little bit of burnt sienna and maybe a touch of orange where there's going to be some strong light. And then I go to, while that's still wet, I go into a sap green that's dulled down with a little olive green and some of the browns. Because sap green is very strong and very vibrant and a little too bright. So I tone it down a bit, and this then has a light and a middle tone, and a darker value that I'm using is olive green, and it's touched with a little bit of brown, which you'll see that some of the needles where they join to the limbs are shaded a bit more, but also they're used for accent and to kind of show how the growth has light and dark within each little bunch. And it's been a lot of fun. This part made me a little nervous painting over the sky, just in that I didn't want to do something goofy and splatter or spill or something. I've done that before and it's hard to reclaim. There's still a little bit of the drawing gum residue on the paper, which is okay. I'm going to paint over it for the first maybe 2 layers, and then I'll remove it, and at that point I'll be able to see where it's highlighted and what textures I've got. And there really isn't a whole lot of sharp detail in this section. It's a bit distant. I don't think you would perceive, the bark, for example, a difference in color, yes, but not line and grain of the wood or something like that. There's a lot of little limbs that I will be suggesting with a really small brush. And once I have this section finished, the last thing I've got to do here is a signature, and I put that, as you'll see, it's going to be way down to the right in the on the rock, and it's not too obtrusive. It's I kind of don't like to draw too much attention to the signature. I want the painting to be the object of attention, and so this is a very long video, I realize, and I'm going to speed it up here as I have been. And I really thank everybody for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll show some of the finished work at the end where I have some decent photographs and can frame it all in without any masking or plastic or a palette with cardboard sitting on top, or my hand or my head in the road, and you'll be able to see what the finished product looks like. This video is called the Grand Finale, and this is for Grand Entrance. If any of you want to check out my website, it's mkirkpatrick.com.
and Kirk Art Studio, I think, has a link to it on YouTube. I'll put it in the description. And if you want to see some more photos of this finished work, you can go to that website. But thanks a lot. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope this one isn't putting you to sleep. But I'll be back with my next composition, and we'll see you then.